Hello, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. Today, we are going to talk about the 5 common mistakes that new cookie decorators make and how you can avoid them. These, of course, are just my opinion, but I have been a cookie decorator for over a decade, and I've done all these things, just FYI. So let me just check to see if I am live on Instagram because this is a brand new way to do this. And I'm really hoping that I am. But if I'm not, it's no big deal. I'm not sure if I am. Anyway, let's just get ready, shall we? So if you don't know me, I'm Lauren, the Cheerful Baker. Hey, Marianne. Hey, Melissa. Um, and so be sure and tell me hi when you jump on because obviously I'll just feel like I'm sitting in this office by myself, talking to myself, and that seems weird. So let's talk about the 5 most common mistakes. The first one, and I should just tell you, like I've said, I've done all of these that I'm getting ready to say, every single one of them and plus lots more. So if you are in the beginning stages of cookie decorating, don't feel bad if you are doing some of these right now. If you've been cookie decorating for years and you're still doing these, no stress. I mean, don't stress because we all make lots of mistakes in the beginning and going through. But the most common one is icing consistency issues, right? Either your icing's too runny or it's too thick. And I'm going to give you a little tip about that. If you are decorating cookies, you first want to test your icing. And if it's not right, you want to fix it. And so the way that I like to do that is I have small icing bowls and they hold probably 8 ounces, I would say, of icing. And I will make my big batch of icing. Then I have a scale. I'll put my icing on or my bowl on the scale. I'll zero it out. I'll put in about 8 ounces of icing. And then I will measure exactly. I don't do this anymore because I know how much icing, how much water to put in. But what I would suggest, and this is what I did in the beginning, you measure exactly how much water you put in, and then you write that down because you won't remember it because we're artsy, right? So you measure it, and then when you think you have the perfect consistency for piping, you put a little bit of icing in a bag and you pipe on a piece of parchment paper, on a paper towel. It doesn't matter. And you see if you like the consistency of that icing. If you don't, you want to change it right now before you start making a bunch of cookies. So let's say it's perfect and you love it. Then you know um, how much water to add to the rest of the icing. Let's say you have 3 colors and you think you might need only 4 ounces of each color, and you use a tablespoon of water. You know that you're going to use a half a tablespoon. So, my point is, you want to test it before you fill all of your bags with icing to make sure you have the consistency right. The same thing with the flood. You want to get it to flood consistency, figure out how much water you add, and then put some in a bag and test it and see if it does what you want it to do. If it doesn't, you fix it before you put it in a bunch of bags because you're just not going to have success. And I still do that. I mean, occasionally, usually for me, I get my icing too thick. And if I do, I take it out and I add more water because it's just going to make cookie decorating more difficult. So that is the first thing, icing consistency. Test it before you decorate a whole bunch of cookies. And I always figure out what my consistency should be when the icing is white and then add my color to it. I don't add icing to a bowl, add the color, and then figure out what each bowl needs to be because that's really time consuming. So figure out your consistency when it's white, divide it up, figure out how much water you need to add, do that for every bowl, then add the color, and you will have so much more success when cookie decorating if you test your consistency first. Okay, second mistake is if you have icing, bleeding, or cratering. And there are a couple reasons why that happens. Humidity can cause that if you have too much humidity, improper drying, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. It's mainly too thin of icing. So the icing bleeding, for example, can happen because you have improper drying. If you put your colors right next to each other and you have color bleeding, a lot of times it's because you did not put your cookie in front of a fan to dry, or you did not put it in a dehydrator. I use a dehydrator and I do not have color bleed ever. Mine is a Cabela. It goes down to 55 degrees. So it acts just like a fan. It does not dry my cookie out, but it really helps with color bleeding. Um, Cratering is the same thing. Usually, if you have cratering, your icing is too thin. And so thicken your icing up a little bit in small icing areas if you are experiencing cratering. Another thing that can cause cratering is oversaturated color. So if you are doing black or red and you just put in tons of icing color, then oftentimes you will oversaturate your icing and you will have craters. So, of course, we could talk, a long time about all these things, but these are just some basics. A third one is messy piping or messy outlines. There is nothing that makes cookies look better from the very beginning than clean piping lines. It really makes a difference. So you can get a piece of paper and draw some circles on it and draw some lines on it and draw some squiggles on it. And you can, if you're not going to use the icing for food, if you're just going to practice with it, get yourself the right consistency, the consistency that you like for piping, and practice and practice and practice. Practice touching the icing tip to the paper and then bringing it up and drawing a straight line and then touching again. Practice touching the icing tip to the paper, drawing a circle, touching the icing tip to the paper. Practicing piping it really is something that can make such a huge difference in the way that your cookies look. And you get good at that by muscle memory and by practicing. You can also get a sheet of paper, like I said, draw different squiggles, lines, squares, and then you can put that inside of a page protector that you get for a child going to school. And then you can practice on there and you can just wipe it off. So if you are newer to cookie decorating, I would highly suggest that you practice with leftover icing. It will really, really make a difference on your outlines. Um, you also can use stencils. Stencils are great, especially with words. If you are if you have shaky handwriting, then use a stencil. It really makes a difference, and it's a great tool if you feel like your handwriting isn't great. But again, just practice being able to expertly draw with royal icing, with piping. That'll make a big difference. Number 4 mistakes that a lot of new cookie decorators make is What I had written down is a little bit different than what I'm gonna talk about, but it is I said your cookie's spreading too much, but really, what I think is the biggest problem that I see besides that, is not baking your cookies long enough. You know, there is a great reaction that happens in the oven with sugar and heat, and it's called the Maillard, I think I'm saying that correctly, reaction, and that gives the good caramelization to the cookie. It makes your cookie so much better. Many people think that if your cookie browns on the back, it's overbaked. It can be, but you want a little bit of browning on your cookie. Now, if it's really brown, then, your cookie might be crisper than you like, but if it's not brown at all, if you see no browning on the back, I would almost guarantee that your cookie is not completely baked in the center either. So make sure that you have a little bit of browning on your cookie. In fact, it was so funny because one of the first big orders that I got after baking, decorating cookies, this was, I don't know, probably 9 years ago. It was for, a very prominent person in the community, and she had gotten my name from somebody, and she had this huge 16th birthday party for her daughter. And so she asked me to make cookies. It was a recommendation from someone, and she asked a very well-known cake artist to make the cake. And this was at a country club. This was a fancy event. And the cake artist and I happened to arrive at the same time, and she was just the nicest person. I mean, we went in talking, chatting, just had a great time, and I sat the cookies down, and she sat the cake down, and she immediately picked up one of the cookies and flipped it over and said, "Thank God you baked your cookies long enough. They're supposed to be brown on the back." And I thought, "Oh my g" and the customer was standing there. I mean, I thought, "What in the world if I hadn't have baked them long enough?" So I thought that was a little rude, honestly, but she was right. I thought that the way she handled it was a little rude because she was in front of the customer, but, you should definitely make sure that your cookies are a little brown on the back. It's just adds those caramel notes and just makes your cookies a lot better. If your cookies do spread, a lot of times there's 2 reasons. One, your butter is too warm. You only want your butter to be room temperature. You do not want it to be warm. So whenever you put your finger into the butter, you want a slight depression. If it's goopy, you can really put your finger in. It's too warm. And oftentimes, if you use butter like that, your cookies will spread. A lot of times too, it usually mostly is a temperature issue. So if you love a recipe that you are making and you are experiencing cookie spread, you might try chilling your dough overnight. That's what I always do. I think it makes it so much easier to work with. Or you can cut out your cookies, you can place them on a baking sheet, put them in the refrigerator for about 15 minutes, and then bake them and see if that makes a difference in the spread. If it doesn't, find a new cookie recipe. Honestly, there's so many cookie recipes out there. Do a little trial and error so you find the one that you like. I use 3 cookie recipes. That's it, because they always work. They're delicious. I know there's 1,000 recipes out there. I'm not gonna use them all. I'm gonna use the ones that have proven success. And then number 5, biggest mistake that I see new cookie decorators make is running out of time and getting overwhelmed. Because I see so many posts of people who are in the all night club, who stay up all night doing an order. And this is, I am the most unorganized human being that you'll ever meet in a lot of ways. I mean, I have a typical artist brain. I never sit still. I run 100 miles a minute, but I learned very early in my cookie journey that if I was not organized, I would drive myself crazy. And so now the way that I do organization for me, and you have to find what works for you, but this is what works for me. I make cookie dough one time a month. I make because I don't like making cookie dough. I'm the artist. I mean, look at my outfit. Can you tell I'm an artist? I'm the artist. I like doing the decorating. So I make cookie dough one time a month. I put the dough in huge Ziploc bags. I flatten them out and I put them in the freezer because I don't like doing that. And so I make a whole bunch of cookie dough. I mean, I usually make 8 batches at once and stick them in the freezer. Um, Next, when I have an order on a weekend, most always their orders are on the weekends, I'll take the dough out of the refrigerator. I freeze my dough in 2 dozen bags of that make 2 dozen cookies. So I'll take a bag because my minimum is 2 dozen. So they're either usually 2 dozen or 4 dozen cookies. I'll take it out of the freezer and I'll put it in the refrigerator on Sunday night. Then Monday, I bake the cookies. That's all I do on Monday. I don't do anything else but bake the cookies. Tuesday, I'll usually make the icing. That's all I do. I don't like doing too many things at once. I become overwhelmed. I'm messy, so my kitchen is a mess. I don't like working like that. Wednesday, I will flood the cookies. Thursday, I will detail the cookies. Friday, I will package the cookies. Saturday, the customer picks up the cookies. So that's what I do 98% of the time. There's an occasion where that doesn't work. And so I'll have to think, or I have something to do and I just can't do something that day. But doing it that way keeps me from being overwhelmed. When I first started, I would bake the cookies, make the icing, flood the cookies all in the same day. And it would take me forever. And I was exhausted. And I thought, I don't want to do this. So I don't do that anymore because you don't want to feel overwhelmed. This is fun, right? I mean, we're cookie decorators. We have a great time in life. So I would love to know what's some mistakes that you all have made. I'm going to tell you my biggest, and I have taught, if you've watched me, you've probably heard this because I talk about this all the time. But one of the biggest, well, I made two. Okay, let me talk about the one um that I made in the beginning because I didn't know any better. A friend of mine owned a business and she was having a grand opening. And so this was before the Eddie. She gave me her stencil or she gave me her logo and she asked me to make 100 cookies for this grand opening event. And so I had someone make the logo for me on a stencil because I didn't know how to do that yet. And I iced the cookies at night and the next morning, and it was during the summer, so it was really humid. I did not have a dehydrator. The next day, the cookies were dry. So I took my airbrush and I airbrushed the logo on all the cookies. And I waited a couple hours. I mean, I thought they look dry. They're fine. Can you all guess what happened? I packaged them all. It was fine. I put them in a box because there were 100 cookies. So I put them in a box. I got in the car the next morning and I go, I'm so excited about taking these cookies to my friend. And I pulled the first cookie out and the icing, hey, Jamie, the airbrush had smeared because it was not completely dry when I piped the cookie or when I packaged the cookie. And it was a white cookie with black airbrush on it. And I felt so unbelievably bad. I mean, unbelievably bad. So I took them all out of, hey, Robin, I took them all out of the packaging. I ran to Michael's. I got more packaging because I had about 2 hours till this grand opening. I crazily repackaged most all of the cookies. They still looked like crap. But they didn't look as bad because a lot of the airbrush color had gone onto the packages. And that was a nightmare, and I felt horrible because this was a friend of mine, and she was paying me, quite a bit of money. So, that's one of the biggie mistakes that I made, and had I followed my plan in the beginning where, I ice one day, I make the cookie, my cookie would have had a longer time to dry before I, packaged it. So that was one of my biggies. So does anybody on here want to share one of your biggest cookie mistakes? I would love to hear that I'm not alone because I've made them. I had cookies that cratered like crazy. One of the first orders I made, and I'm like, what is happening? Because I went to bed, the cookies looked great. Woke up the next day, Crater City. I put cookies in the oven, turned the to overnight, turned the oven on, the next morning because I forgot they were in there. I mean, I've done lots and lots of things. So again, let's recap. The first mistake is icing consistency and issues, and we talked a little bit about that. The second is icing bleeding and cratering. The third is messy piping, messy outlines. The fourth is cookies spreading too much or not baking your cookies enough. And the last one is not having a plan and running out of time or feeling overwhelmed. So, does anybody have a question for me? Let me go to YouTube because we're on there too and see if there is anyone on YouTube that has a question about what we're talking about. And I would love it if you all have any questions. Okay, that's me. Let's see. Oh, Melissa. Oh, Melissa, you're on YouTube. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that I could see YouTube comments on here too. That's awesome. Marianne, these are great tips, all that I can use. I don't have any mess ups since I'm still very new. Well, you will, Marianne. Or who knows? Maybe you won't. I hope you don't. Maybe I can be a good cookie coach and keep you from having some of those issues. That would be wonderful for me. Anybody else experience any crazy cookie issues that we should talk about? Maybe not. But if you do have questions, I have a lot of information over on my website, which is cheerfulbaker.com. And I have a blog that I need to write more posts for, but there's a lot of content over there. So hopefully that will help you. I'm going to attempt to turn this into a blog, this information, so you can, go back and watch it. But Melissa, you're welcome. I appreciate you watching. And let's see, next week we are going to do another live, and it is going to be a question and answer with, I'm going to tell you what the title is. Let me look here real quick. Because I set these all up at the beginning of the month, and then I'm like, I don't even know what I said I would talk about. Next week, excuse me, we're going to talk about ask me anything about starting cookie decorating. So if you are watching, I would love for you to email me a question at lauren@cheerfulbaker.com, because next week is all about answering your all's questions. And if you are a Cheerful Box subscriber, there is a surprise that's going to come out in an email this evening. So be on the lookout for that. Let's see, Jamie, I'm brand new as well. My big mistake so far was leaving my first iced cookies in the dehydrator overnight. It was off, but the cookies were still dry the next day. I should have bagged them sooner. Do you mean they were too dry the next day? Leaving my first iced cookies in the dehydrator overnight. It was off, but the cookies were still dry the next day. Um, Jamie, if your dehydrator was off, actually, that should not have affected your cookies at all. In fact, that's a great place to leave your cookies overnight. So I really don't think that that probably affected your outcome at all. I leave my cookies at night in the dehydrator all the time. It could be your royal icing recipe, possibly. Um, but give me a little information in the group about that, and we can talk about that. Let's see, what's this one? Is a dehydrator a good investment, or are you fine with that one? So there are a couple of cookie tools that I would not live without. One is a dehydrator. It is the greatest. One is a dehydrator, one is a, projector. I would not do cookies without those 2 things. My dehydrator is a Cabela. It goes down to 55 degrees, so it's more like a fan. It makes my cookie decorating go so much faster because when I do a base layer, and I want to go ahead and add something quickly on top of that, it enables my cookies to dry so much faster. Now, I do use a dehydrator sheet on my dehydrator trays so that the airflow does not go on the bottom of the cookie, but only goes on the top where the icing is. Jamie, that could be your case. I would be curious to know what temperature you put your dehydrator on, how long you left them in there, because it most likely was what you did with the cookie while it was in the dehydrator instead of just leaving them in the dehydrator if the dehydrator was off. Here's a thing about the dehydrator too that I want to caution you about. If you put your cookies in the dehydrator, and let's say you put them on, I'll leave mine on like 65 degrees because that's about room temperature the whole time I'm decorating. And I just put them in there when I'm not working on them. When I want to work on them, I bring them back out. If I only have, let's say I'm detailing cookies, and then I have one cookie that I'm only flooding because I want the next day to do a stencil with it. If I put it in the dehydrator while it's wet and close the door, there's no airflow in that dehydrator and the icing will ripple. So never ever put a wet cookie in a dehydrator, turn the dehydrator off and close the door. Never ever do that because your icing will dry really funky because there's no airflow. Okay, good. It was on 95 for 30 minutes on parchment paper, but the door was open. Jamie, I would wonder what your recipe is. I would do a test and because you should be able to leave your cookies for 3 or 4 days without icing, I mean, without packaging them, and they should really be fine. So, I would have some questions about your recipe. I don't think it was the dehydrator. I don't think. I just haven't had that experience. So, any other questions about, basic newbie cookie issues? Is anybody going to CookieCon? Because I am, and I'm so excited. And I'm going to be in the challenge butter booth in the vendor hall. So please come see me. I ordered a glitzy purse. I should have brought it up here so I could have shown you all because it came in today. I ordered a glitzy purse that is a stick of butter. It is the most fantastic waste of money I've ever seen in my life. But I will have that there with me. So please come by and say hi to me. Do you leave the door open also? I do not leave the door open while my dehydrator is running. If I leave my cookies overnight, I do leave the door open. I do. I don't ever close the door to my dehydrator with the cookies in unless my dehydrator is running. So, Jamie, are you going to CookieCon? I mean, I wonder if my husband, I'm gonna see if he'll bring my purse up. Let me text him because I have to show you all. Because it's just so fantastic. Let's see if he can. I don't know if he's busy. Yeah, I thought I needed a better purse for the, booth. So again, if you have questions, if you're watching this on the replay, please email me so I can talk about that next week, or I'm just going to be on here by myself. Normally, I am live on Wednesday mornings at 9:30 a.m., but I had a doctor's appointment this morning. My yearly physical, that's always fun. And oh, here comes my assistant. Here comes my unpack. Are y'all ready? Look. Is that the most fantastic thing you have ever seen? Look at this. I mean, don't you just love it? Can you see how glittery it is? And if you open it up, it's like hot pinky red on the inside. I mean, and it says butter me up. And on the bottom, it has the tablespoons. Isn't that the greatest thing? I mean, I saw it and I'm like, I gotta have that. Because I'm the better person. Thank you. Thank you all. It is fun. I'm so excited. You only live one life. You gotta wear the crazy dress. You gotta wear the butter purse. So I will let you all go. I'm rambling now. Thank you for watching, and I will look forward to talking to you next Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. like normal because I don't have any more doctor's appointments. So have a great day. Be cheerful. Bye.